May 2006, Bethesda Softworks released a piece of downloadable content for The Elder Scrolls 4: Oblivion that consisted of a single, purely cosmetic suit of golden armor for a horse. It cost $2.50. The internet erupted in a chorus of mockery, calling it the height of corporate greed and a useless vanity project. But Bethesda wasn't laughing. They were watching the data. That digital horse armor became the patient zero of the modern microtransaction, a tiny, glittering sign that the industry was shifting away from selling complete experiences towards selling infinite digital scraps. What began as a studio of visionary geeks building infinite worlds in a Maryland office has metastasized into a corporate titan obsessed with the rockstar blueprint, the pursuit of a single immortal product that generates billions in recurring revenue while the creative soul of the studio atrophies under the weight of its own ambition. They were once the kings of the single-player epic, the only studio that could make a world feel truly alive. But today, they are a leviathan in a midlife crisis, desperately chasing the ghost of Grand Theft Auto Online, sacrificing their technical stability and their narrative identity for a forever game that refuses to arrive. This is the story of Bethesda's frantic, hollowed-out chase to become the next Rockstar. For over a decade, Bethesda was the only studio that could arguably stand in the same prestigious circle as Rockstar Games. If Rockstar owned the crime drama, Bethesda owned the fantasy epic and the post-apocalyptic wasteland. When Skyrim launched in 2011, it wasn't just a game, it was a cultural phenomenon. It sold 30 million copies and became the template for the modern open world. At that moment, Todd Howard was the only man in the industry whose name carried the same weight as the Houser brothers. Bethesda was the Rockstar of RPGs, a studio that released a generational masterpiece every 5 years, redefined the medium, and moved on.
But while Bethesda was resting on the laurels of Skyrim, Rockstar was quietly changing the fundamental math of the video game industry. In 2013, the launch of Grand Theft Auto 5 and its subsequent multiplayer component, GTA Online, didn't just move the goalposts, it burned down the stadium. Rockstar had discovered the billion-dollar blueprint. They no longer needed to release a game every 5 years to stay relevant. They could simply update a single world, sell digital currency, and generate more profit in a single quarter than Bethesda had made in its entire history. This realization sent a shockwave through Bethesda's parent company, ZeniMax. The pressure to innovate was suddenly replaced by the pressure to extract. Bethesda stopped looking at what made their games unique, the lore, the discovery, the clunky but charming freedom, and started looking at Rockstar's engagement metrics. They wanted their own GTA Online. They wanted a world where the players never left and the credit cards never stopped swiping. The first casualty of this chase was the technical soul of the studio. While Rockstar poured hundreds of millions into the Rage engine to create the photorealistic, physics-perfect world of Red Dead Redemption 2, Bethesda remained shackled to the Creation engine, a patchwork Frankenstein of code dating back to the early 2000s. To the executives, the engine was good enough, as long as it could host a storefront. This technical debt began to rot the product from the inside out. Bethesda tried to build a high-speed racing machine on a horse and buggy chassis. They wanted the scale of a Rockstar world without the investment in the foundational tech that makes those worlds believable. The result was a widening gap between the prestige Bethesda promised in their trailers and the broken reality players found on their screens. The ultimate expression of this identity crisis arrived in November 2018. Fallout 76 was Bethesda's literal attempt to clone the Rockstar model.
They took their most atmospheric, lonely, and narrative-driven franchise
and stripped it of its NPCs, its choice, and its consequence, replacing them with a map full of live service chores and a $10 per month subscription fee. It was a cynical autopsy of the looter-shooter genre, a game that prioritised daily active users over player satisfaction. Bethesda had convinced themselves that their fans would accept any level of technical incompetence as long as they could buy a power armor skin in the Atom Shop. The launch was a radioactive disaster, a PR nightmare of canvas bags and leaking personal data that shattered the Todd Howard magic forever. They weren't chasing a creative vision, they were chasing a dividend. But the chase didn't end with Fallout 76. It only intensified after the $7.5 billion acquisition by Microsoft. When a trillion-dollar corporation buys you for the price of a small nation's GDP, they don't want a Game of the Year trophy, they want a platform. Microsoft bought Bethesda to feed the hungry maw of Game Pass, a subscription service that demands infinite content. This added a new layer of desperation to Bethesda's Rockstar envy. They were no longer just chasing profit, they were chasing scope. They believed that if they couldn't match Rockstar's detail, they could beat them with volume. This led to the development of Starfield, a game that promised 1,000 planets but delivered 1,000 empty loading screens. Starfield was supposed to be Bethesda's Red Dead Redemption 2 moment, the definitive statement of their mastery over the open world. Instead, it exposed the fundamental flaw in their pursuit. Rockstar understands that an open world is a simulation of life. Bethesda thinks an open world is a series of interconnected menus. In Starfield, the freedom Bethesda touted for years felt like a hollow marketing buzzword.
Every time a player hit a loading screen or encountered a procedurally generated outpost that looked exactly the same the one 3 planets ago, the illusion of the Rockstar tier experience evaporated. Bethesda had spent 8 years building a universe that felt smaller than a single city block in Los Santos. They focused on the where while forgetting the why. The tragedy of Bethesda's chase is that they are pursuing a version of Rockstar that no longer exists for anyone else to copy. Rockstar's success is built on an obsessive, soul-crushing detail and a budget that essentially allows them to out-brute force reality. Bethesda, by contrast, has always been the studio of compromise. Their charm was in the jank, the weird AI interactions, and the ability to put every cabbage in a dungeon into your backpack. By trying to sanitize and rockstarify their output, they've lost the very thing that made them a viable alternative. They are trying to be a prestige developer while maintaining a work-in-progress development culture. It is an unsustainable contradiction that has left their latest games feeling sterile and dated at launch. This identity crisis is now bleeding into the development of the Elder Scrolls V6. The expectations are no longer just higher than Skyrim, they are higher than GTA 6. Bethesda is trapped in a prison of their own making. If they release a traditional Bethesda RPG, it will be mocked for being technically ancient compared to Rockstar's upcoming Florida State simulation. If they try to innovate and create another live service hybrid, they risk another Fallout 76 catastrophe. They are paralysed by the need to be the king of the industry while their crown is visibly rusting. They are competing with a memory of who they used to be and a fantasy of who Rockstar is. The cynical truth behind the Bethesda-Rockstar rivalry is that the industry has become too expensive for artistic risks. In the 2000s, Bethesda could afford to be weird.
Today, every game must be a safe harbour for investment. Rockstar's pivot to GTA Online was the death knell for the creative mid-budget epic. It forced everyone to either go indie or go infinite. Bethesda chose to go infinite, but they didn't have the engine, the discipline, or the vision to pull it off. They traded their reputation for a seat at the billion-dollar table, only to realise the table was already full and the bill was overdue.